You think you know what desperation looks like? Try staring at your son, knowing you can't promise him the future he deserves. Essence's words cut through the tense silence of the Pacific Palisade estate. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet the weight of her pain filled the room. Marcus Valehart stood frozen, his dark eyes locked onto hers. He had expected a woman of control, someone who'd play the part for the cameras. Instead, he was staring at a woman on the edge, caught between survival and sacrifice. She knew the truth. She could feel the rawness in the air. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the tension that had been brewing for weeks was finally boiling over. Marcus had no idea what he'd just walked into. Her secret was a ticking time bomb, one that could shatter everything they were trying to build. Marcus didn't speak, didn't move. His fingers twitched, as if caught between wanting to understand and wanting to turn away from the truth that loomed between them. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. Neither of them could make the first move. It wasn't just a marriage anymore. It was a fragile web of lies, secrets, and shifting allegiances, and Marcus wasn't ready to face the depth of what that really meant. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I've truly missed you all. It's been a challenging season with a few technical issues, but by God's grace, everything is coming back together. Thank you for standing by me. Your love, patience, and continued support me more than words can express. As we move into this new year together, I want to wish every one of you a happy new year. May this season bring you peace, renewed strength, open doors, and fresh opportunities in all that you do. Before we begin, I want to say a short prayer over everyone watching. To the women watching, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your heart with peace, favor, and joy throughout this year. To the men watching, may God guide your steps, bless the work of your hands, and grant you wisdom in the days ahead. And may God protection, grace, and love rest upon every single one of you. Amen. If you're ready for today's story, please hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you and I appreciate you. And please stay till the end, because another powerful story is coming your way. Now, let's get into the story. It had been a month since Essence had signed away her life to Marcus Valehart. A year-long contract, a fake marriage, all in the name of survival. The deal had seemed simple at first. Erase a debt, protect a son, and pretend to be the perfect wife in public. But it hadn't been that easy. And Marcus, the cold, calculating billionaire, had no idea that beneath a determined facade, Essence was hiding a truth far bigger than their agreement. Essence walked through the grand, cold marble halls of the Pacific Palisade estate, the weight of her surroundings sinking deeper into her bones every day. The first few days, she told herself she would get used to it. The endless expanse of glass walls, the chrome and glass decor that screamed wealth, and the constant hum of staff moving in and out. She should have been grateful for all of it. But the longer she stayed, the more alien it felt. The house wasn't a home. It was a museum of perfection, a place built on money, status, and unattainable ideals. She wasn't a guest here. She was a fixture in a grand display. The contrast between this and the small, cluttered apartment she had left behind with Alaric seemed a lifetime ago. The scent of fresh flowers Marcus had ordered for the house did little to mask the emptiness that lingered in every room. She stepped into the massive living room, where the view of the ocean stretched out before her like a painting, beautiful and distant. She longed to feel connected to it, but she couldn't. Not here. Not in this place. Essence's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. 10:30 a.m. Another meeting. Another set of expectations she had no desire to meet. But she was here, playing the part she had agreed to play. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from the nanny. Alaric, her ever-curious son, had been asking about Marcus again. Essence bit her lip, swallowing the knot that had formed in her throat. It wasn't just the estate she was struggling with. It was a constant reminder of the life she was living, and the boy who was too young to understand it. She had worked hard to shield him from the truth of their arrangement, the terms of the marriage that bound them together. He thought they were just living in a big house for a little while, until everything got better. She hadn't lied to him outright. She just hadn't told him everything. Her steps echoed softly as she moved toward the window. The city stretched out beneath her, and for a brief moment, she wondered how much longer she could keep pretending. Could she keep up the mask for a whole year? Behind her, the door to the office opened with a soft click, pulling her from her thoughts. She didn't need to turn to know it was Marcus. His presence filled the space in a way that seemed both distant and overwhelming. Essence. Marcus's voice cut through the silence, flat and professional, like he was addressing a colleague in a boardroom. He didn't need to say more. They both knew why he was there. Another logistical meeting. Another reminder of the distance that stretched between them. She turned, forcing a smile. "Marcus," she replied, "how's your day?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze flickered over her briefly, but he didn't offer the warm smile or pleasantry she might have expected from someone who would even pretend to care. Instead, he merely nodded, his sharp, calculating eyes scanning the papers in his hand. "We'll need to update the press release for next week's event. The guest list is finalized," he said in his usual clipped tone. His focus was already on the task at hand, his mind clearly somewhere else. Essence swallowed the bitterness that rose in her throat. Asterisk the guest list star. Another reminder that they were no more than a display. A carefully orchestrated performance for the public. She could already feel the weight of the cameras, the expectations, and the coldness of it all pressing down on her. "I'll make sure I'm ready," she said, her voice sounding more distant than she intended. Marcus didn't notice. He never did. His attention was already turning back to the paperwork in his hands, and before she knew it, he was walking past her, his footsteps purposeful. There was no real connection between them, just business. Always business. A few hours later, Essence found herself in the kitchen, trying to distract herself by making lunch. The staff had prepared most of the meals, but she needed something to do. As she chopped vegetables, her thoughts wandered back to Alaric. She hadn't seen much of him lately. He was out with a nanny most of the time, his curiosity about his new life both a blessing and a curse. It was hard enough to answer his questions about Marcus. Harder still to explain why his mother wasn't ever really with him anymore. It was all part of the deal. After all, she was supposed to play the part of the perfect wife while her son learned to navigate a life that felt more like a performance than a family. "Mom." Essence turned at the sound of her son's voice, the familiar warmth in his eyes tugging at something deep inside her. He stood in the doorway, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Where's Marcus?" Essence's stomach churned. She wanted to shield him from the truth, to protect him from the lie that she was living. But how could she explain to a child that the man they lived with wasn't really part of their family? "He's in the office, honey. He's busy with work," she said, her voice softer than she'd meant it to be. "Why does he always seem so busy?" Alaric asked, walking further into the kitchen, his gaze flicking between her and the empty spot at the dining table where Marcus would usually sit, alone. Essence forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's just how things are sometimes." Alaric didn't seem convinced. He scrunched his nose, clearly sensing something was wrong but too young to fully understand. Before Essence could speak again, a voice called from the hallway, deep and detached. "Essence, we need to go over the event details before the press conference." She stiffened. "Marcus, I'll be right there," she said, her heart sinking. Another cold reminder that this wasn't a family. This was a transaction. The day passed by in a blur of meetings and empty conversations. Marcus remained distant, absorbed in his world of power and control, while Essence drifted through haze, alone, but surrounded by opulence. Every step she took, every moment she spent within the cold walls of the estate, felt like a mile further from the person she used to be. And the worst part? She wasn't sure if she was ever going to find her way back. As the sun set over the horizon, Essence sat alone in the living room, gazing out at the glittering lights of the city below. She had agreed to this. She had chosen survival over everything else. But as the loneliness began to press in, she realized she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending that this was all enough. It had been another day of empty glances, forced smiles, and meetings with no real connection. Essence had grown used to the cold, mechanical nature of her marriage to Marcus, but something was changing. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it was like an undercurrent that she couldn't escape. Marcus had always been distant, focused on his work, his world of numbers and power. But lately, his eyes lingered on her a little too long. Not the usual quick glances that seemed almost dismissive, but something more curious. He was watching her, studying her in ways that made her skin crawl. Essence felt the tension between them, tightening with every passing day. She had always been able to hide behind her calm, controlled exterior, but with Marcus starting to pay more attention, it was becoming harder to keep up the facade. Every small detail, every reaction, everything she did seemed to be scrutinized now. He was beginning to see through the mask she'd worn for so long. The nights were the hardest. After their public meetings, the long days of appearances, they would return to the estate, and Marcus would retreat to his office, absorbed in his world. Essence would try to busy herself with her own work or with Alaric, but the silence of the house was unbearable. Tonight, as she walked through the vast living room, Marcus was sitting on the couch, his eyes scanning his phone, lost in thought. She almost didn't notice him there, until he looked up, his gaze meeting hers. "Essence," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft. "We need to talk about the upcoming charity event. It's a bigger deal than we anticipated." She nodded, offering the polite smile she perfected, though it didn't reach her eyes. The conversations with Marcus were always business now, always cold. But this time, something was different. His tone lacked the usual sharpness, the disconnection that had become their routine. There was something almost personal in his voice. Essence's chest tightened. What is he trying to do? She could feel the old familiar unease creeping back in. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending. Later that evening, as Essence tucked Alaric into bed, she heard footsteps coming down the hallway. She wasn't surprised to see Marcus standing at the door. What did surprise her, however, was the soft smile on his face as he looked down at Alaric. "Good night, Alaric," he said, his voice gentle. Alaric blinked, clearly surprised by the sudden warmth in Marcus's voice. "Sleep well." Essence stood frozen in the doorway, her breath catching. For a moment, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Marcus, the man who had barely acknowledged her existence, now offering a moment of kindness to her son. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath the surface. When Marcus turned to leave, she caught his eyes. His gaze was steady, almost searching. "You've done well, keeping things together," he said, before walking away without another word. Essence's thoughts were scattered as she lay in bed that night, the feeling of Marcus's unexpected warmth lingering in her mind. She had told herself that their marriage was just a contract, that she wouldn't allow herself to feel anything beyond the necessary. But now, there was a crack in the armor. The tension between them was undeniable. And worse yet, the moment with Alaric had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. In the quiet hours of the night, as the house slept, Marcus sat in his office, the glow of his computer screen casting a pale light on his face. He was no longer just reviewing documents. His focus was on something else, something that didn't have numbers or figures. Essence. The more he watched her, the more he noticed the small things. The way she shifted when asked a question. The way her eyes would dart away when he probed just a little too deeply. There was something she was hiding, and he was determined to find out what it was. As the days went on, Marcus began researching her. Her financial troubles were easy enough to uncover, but there was more. He found bits and pieces, contradictions in her story. There were gaps, too many for it to be a coincidence. Something was off, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Essence wasn't just hiding her past from him. She was hiding something far more dangerous. The tension between them grew sharper with every passing day. Essence could feel it, too. Marcus was becoming more observant, more calculating. He was getting closer. And with each passing moment, the walls she'd built around herself, around her family, were beginning to crack. The fear she had buried deep inside, the fear that Marcus would uncover her secrets, started to rise. Essence couldn't afford for him to dig too deep. Not when everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, was on the line. As Marcus dug deeper into her life, Essence knew one thing for sure. The balance of their carefully constructed world was shifting. And she was running out of time to keep her secrets buried. It was an ordinary evening. Marcus sat at his sleek desk in his home office, the light from his laptop casting a cold, sterile glow across the room. He'd been working late again, though his mind wandered more than usual. Essence's behavior, the little things she tried to hide, the way she tensed when he asked certain questions, had been gnawing at him. There was something there, something deeper than the persona she showed the world. He had resisted it at first. After all, Their arrangement was simple. He needed a wife for appearances, and she needed a way out of the mess her life had become. He'd told himself he didn't care about the details, as long as she fulfilled her part of the deal. But now, as days turned into weeks, his curiosity had turned into suspicion. It was that suspicion that drove him to his files. At first, it had been something innocent enough, just a few routine documents to review for the charity event they were hosting. But then, a different file caught his eye. A man's name. A name he hadn't thought about in years. Victor Harper. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, the name burning into his memory. Victor Harper was a name that had haunted Marcus's past. His former business partner, the one who had betrayed him and destroyed everything he'd worked for. The one who had pushed him to the edge, forcing Marcus to fight tooth and nail to rebuild his empire from the ground up. Marcus's fingers trembled as he opened the file, his eyes scanning the pages. His stomach twisted as he read. There it was. The connection. Essence's name was listed alongside Victor Harper's company, Harper Enterprises, in a series of financial transactions. A partnership. A deal. This wasn't just some distant business connection. Essence had worked with Victor Harper. And from what Marcus could tell, it wasn't just business. No, it looked personal. The kind of personal that reeked of betrayal. His mind raced, reeling from the implications. Was Essence lying to him? Was this some kind of manipulation? Had she known who he was when they met? Had she been playing him all along? He leaned back in his chair, his thoughts spiraling. The woman he had married, the woman he had come to rely on for the facade of a perfect marriage, was tied to the very man who had nearly destroyed him. A flash of memory hit Marcus like a cold wave. He was back in the boardroom, standing across from Victor Harper, the man's smug smile cutting into Marcus's pride. They'd been partners once, but the betrayal had shattered everything. Marcus had trusted Victor, but it was Victor's greed and manipulation that had almost brought Marcus's company to its knees. The fallout had left scars, and Marcus had vowed that he would never allow himself to be blindsided again. The sound of footsteps pulled him back to the present. Essence's soft knock on the door echoed in the silence. She stepped inside, her eyes meeting his with the usual calm composure. She was beautiful, poised, the perfect wife in public, the perfect business partner in private. But now, Marcus could see the cracks in that perfect mask. The tension in the air between them felt like a live wire. "Marcus," she asked, her voice light, but with a faint edge of concern. "You're still working?" He didn't answer immediately, his mind still racing. Instead, he stood, walking over to the window and staring out at the vast city below. His heart pounded as the truth of what he was about to confront began to settle over him. He turned slowly, his voice sharp. "I found something." Essence's eyes widened slightly, her fingers instinctively tightening around the folder she held. "What do you mean?" Her voice was calm, too calm. Marcus took a deep breath. "Victor Harper. You know him, don't you?" Essence froze, the color draining from her face. The brief flicker of panic in her eyes didn't go unnoticed by him. She was hiding something. He was certain of it now. I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, her voice faltering just slightly. Marcus took a step forward. "You worked with him, Essence. I have the documents right here." His eyes bore into haze, watching for any sign of guilt, any crack in her facade. She swallowed, her posture stiffening as she crossed her arms. "It was business," she said, her voice defensive. "Nothing more. I told you I'm trying to fix my past." Marcus's mind was working overtime, piecing together the puzzle. "Business," he echoed, his voice rising slightly. "With a man who nearly destroyed everything I worked for." His chest tightened as the betrayal hit him anew. Essence's gaze shifted, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw a crack in her armor. Her guilt was clear, and it hit him like a punch to the gut. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said quietly, her voice strained. "I never wanted you to find out like this." Marcus took a step back, the weight of her words settling over him like a suffocating cloud. "So you knew who I was when you signed the contract?" His voice was low now, thick with hurt. "Is that why you're really here? Was I just another piece in your plan?" Essence shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "No, Marcus. It's not like that," she pleaded, her voice breaking. I didn't know, not at first, but I was desperate. I never meant to drag you into my mess. But Marcus couldn't hear her anymore. All he could feel was the sting of betrayal. The woman he had trusted, the woman who was supposed to be by his side, had known all along. The distance between them was palpable now. Marcus's suspicions had been confirmed, and the cracks in their marriage, the ones he had ignored for weeks, were now gaping wide. The betrayal was too much to ignore. And yet, even as the tension hung between them, he realized something. The truth about Essence might change everything, but it didn't change how deeply entwined their lives had become. The question was, what would he do next? Essence's hands trembled as she stood in the middle of their bedroom, her back to Marcus, the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest. It had been building for days, the tension, the guilt, but now, as Marcus stood in the doorway, the truth was inevitable. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. She had promised herself that she would protect her son, that she would keep him out of the mess she had found herself in. But this was bigger than her, bigger than any deal she had ever made. Essence, Marcus's voice was low, tight, we need to talk. She felt the walls of her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to crack, for the truth to spill. The fear that had taken root in her stomach began to grow, gnawing at her. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. His eyes were sharp, angry, but there was something else there too. Hurt, betrayal. I'm listening, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't know how you think you're going to explain this, Essence, he began, his voice steady but filled with barely contained rage. You've been lying to me this whole time. She could feel the weight of his words like a physical blow, but she couldn't deny the truth. She had lied. She had kept secrets, secrets that had now caught up with her. And now, everything she had worked so hard to protect, her family, her son, was at risk. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Marcus's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he waited for her response. I didn't know what else to do, Essence said, her voice breaking. I didn't want you to know. Not like this. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Not like what? He demanded. That you're connected to Victor Harper? That you've been hiding that from me? From the start? Essence swallowed hard, the confession spilling from her before she could stop it. Yes, she said, her voice shaking. I worked with him. I was involved with him before. But I didn't know who you were when we first met. I didn't know you were Marcus Valehart. I never wanted this. The words hung in the air, cold and final. But they weren't the whole truth. Not by a long shot. I never meant for you to find out this way, Essence continued, her hands wringing the hem of her blouse. I thought I could protect you. And Alaric. Marcus's face twisted with confusion and anger. Alaric. His voice dropped, the suspicion in his tone like ice. What does Alaric have to do with this? Essence's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant to go this far, hadn't meant to drag Marcus into this mess, but now the lie was slipping further away from her control. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength, before she let the truth out. Marcus, there's something else. Something I wasn't ready to tell you. Alaric. She paused, feeling a lump form in her throat. Alaric's father isn't who you think he is. The room felt like it was spinning. Marcus's eyes widened, and for the first time, he seemed unsure. What the hell does that mean? His voice was a mix of disbelief and frustration. Essence's shoulders slumped, the weight of her decision sinking in. She had been so careful, so protective of her son's truth, but now there was no way out. I didn't know how to tell you, Marcus. Alaric's father is Victor Harper, she whispered, barely able to breathe as the words left her lips. There was a moment of stunned silence. The air between them felt electric, charged with the tension of the revelation. Marcus stood motionless, his face pale as the truth settled into him. Victor Harper, the man who had betrayed Marcus, the man who had nearly ruined his empire. And now, he was tied to Essence, tied to the very person Marcus had chosen to trust. Marcus began, his voice strangled. You had a child with him. The words came out slowly, like he couldn't fully process what he was hearing. his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had shifted under his feet. Essence nodded, tears blurring her vision. I didn't want it to be like this. I never wanted you to be caught up in this mess. I wanted to protect Alaric. And you. Marcus's gaze burned into her, but there was no warmth in it now. The hurt in his eyes cut deeper than she had imagined. He was angry, but more than that, he was heartbroken. She could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his face seemed to age in an instant. "You've been lying to me the whole time," he whispered, his voice breaking. "About Asterisk everything star. And now I find out Alaric's tied to him? To Asterisk Victor Asterisk." Before Essence could respond, she heard a small voice behind her. "Mom." She turned, her heart sinking, to find Alaric standing in the doorway. His wide eyes locked onto Hayes, his innocent gaze flicking between her and Marcus. Alaric had overheard. The secret was no longer just between Marcus and Essence. The cracks in their marriage, the foundation they had both worked so hard to build, were now shattered beyond repair. And as the truth exploded between them, Essence knew that their lives would never be the same again. Marcus sat alone in his study, the weight of the revelation about Alaric's paternity pressing heavily on him. The papers he'd been reviewing now felt meaningless, the familiar business documents replaced by an aching need to understand the truth. Everything he thought he knew about Essence, about the world they were building, was a lie. Victor Harper. The name reverberated in Marcus's mind like an old wound. The man who had betrayed him, who had orchestrated his father's death. Marcus had spent years burying the anger, forcing himself to focus on the empire he'd rebuilt from the ashes of that betrayal. But now, Alaric's connection to Harper had unearthed all those buried memories, memories of a time when his world had shattered. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His father's death still felt like a distant echo, but one that reverberated through every decision he'd made. His father had been everything, the guiding force, the man who had taught him to fight for what was his. When he died, it wasn't just a loss of a loved one. It was a loss of everything that had kept Marcus grounded. The phone rang, snapping him out of his reverie. He didn't bother to answer. His mind was too tangled in memories of his father, of that night, the car crash, the phone call, the moment his life had changed forever. It was late, the night air thick with the smell of rain. Marcus had been at the office, working late as always. The call had come just as he was about to leave. His father's voice, weak but calm, echoed in his ear. "I need you to come home, Marcus. There's been an accident." The drive had been a blur. The hospital lights, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and then the cold, brutal reality. His father was gone, the result of a deliberate crash, a mistake, they said, but Marcus knew the truth. Victor Harper. Marcus didn't need to be told. It had been Harper's doing, his hand in the shadows, pulling strings to secure his own gain. Now, years later, Marcus sat in his study, his hands clenched into fists. Essence's connection to Harper, to the man who had caused his father's death, felt like a betrayal all over again. But there was more to this than just business. The past was alive in their marriage, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Essence was hiding more. He ran his fingers through his hair, pushing aside the anger. He needed answers. But as he began to dig into Essence's past, he found more questions than he could answer. The next day, Marcus confronted Essence, his voice steady but filled with a raw edge of emotion. "Essence," he began, watching her from across the room. "I need to understand. How did you end up connected to Harper? What is your real history with him?" Essence shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Her body language screamed that she wasn't ready to open up. Not fully. "I told you what I could," she said, her voice tight, defensive. "I didn't want to bring all of this into our marriage, Marcus. I wanted to protect you." Her words stung. Protect him? From the truth? The lies? Everything they had built together felt like some slipping through his fingers. "You can't protect me from this," he replied, frustration bleeding into his tone. "I need to know, Essence. I need to understand why you kept this from me." She looked away, her jaw clenched as if fighting back the tears she refused to shed. "It wasn't about you, Marcus. It was about Alaric. I didn't want him to grow up knowing who his real father was, not after everything that happened. I didn't want him to carry that burden. The admission hit Marcus harder than he expected. She was protecting her son. That much was clear. But the cost of her silence had been far greater than either of them had anticipated. As the room fell silent, Marcus felt a shift in his perspective. Essence wasn't just a woman trapped in a marriage of convenience. She was a mother, doing whatever she could to protect her child from a legacy of pain, a legacy tied to him. I understand more than you think, Marcus said quietly. But lying to me, it's not just about me anymore. It's about us, about this family. We're building something, Essence, but it's built on a lie. She shook her head, her voice softening. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you, Marcus. I was just trying to keep my family together. The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. The past had caught up to them both. And now, more than ever, Marcus understood that their marriage was more than just a business arrangement. It was a battlefield, and neither of them had known how deep the wounds went. Essence's gaze softened as she took a tentative step toward him. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but there was something more in them now, vulnerability. I never wanted to drag you into this. I thought if I kept it all hidden, you'd be safe. But now, I don't know how to make it right. Marcus felt the weight of her confession sink into him. He'd spent so long building his empire, fighting the demons of his past, but he hadn't expected to find himself here, in this tangled mess with Essence. She wasn't just part of his world, she was a part of his history now, and that was the hardest truth of all. The past was no longer something Marcus could bury. It was alive, and it had come crashing into the present, shaking the foundation of everything they had tried to build. The stakes were higher now, and the emotional distance between Marcus and Essence was no longer just about the marriage contract. It was about the weight of the past, the betrayal, and the family they were both trying to protect. And in that moment, Marcus realized the hardest part wasn't just forgiving. It was learning to trust again. The truth had been a slow burn, each piece of the puzzle falling into place, each revelation unraveling everything Marcus had thought he understood about Essence, about their marriage. But the final piece, the one that would complete the picture, had remained elusive, until now. Essence stood across from him, her posture rigid, her eyes avoiding his. She knew what this conversation would cost them. She could feel the distance between them widening with every passing second, but the truth had no more room to hide. Marcus, she began, her voice trembling, there's one more thing you need to know. I've kept it from you because I thought I could protect you, but I can't anymore. Alaric's father, she paused, her breath shallow, as if the words physically hurt to say. Alaric's father isn't Victor Harper. The air between them thickened, and for the first time, Marcus's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He asked, the calm in his voice betraying the chaos swirling inside him. Essence swallowed hard. She had no choice but to continue. His real father is Thomas Valehart, your former business partner. The one who... She trailed off, her voice faltering as she met his eyes. The one who was involved in your father's death. The revelation landed with the force of a punch to the gut. Marcus's world tilted. He had expected many things from this marriage, but this was a betrayal too deep to even comprehend. His father's death had always been a raw wound, a scar that had shaped him into the man he was. To hear that the man responsible was tied to his own flesh and blood, to his son, felt like a cruel twist of fate. You're telling me that my former partner, the man who destroyed everything I worked for, is Alaric's father? His voice was low, each word a jagged shot of pain. Essence nodded, the weight of the truth pressing down on her shoulders. I never wanted it to be like this. I never wanted you to find out. I thought I could keep him safe from the past. But now everything is falling apart. Marcus took a step back, his mind racing. His father's death, his rise to power, the betrayal that had shaped his entire life, it was all tied to this moment. His eyes hardened as the anger began to seep in, but it was more than anger. It was a profound sense of betrayal, one that cut through everything he had ever believed about trust, about family. I don't know what to say, Marcus whispered, his voice tight with emotion. How am I supposed to forgive this? Essence? How do I look at my own son and not see the man who took everything from me? Essence took a step forward, her hand trembling as she reached out for him. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose for Alaric to be caught up in all of this. But I can't change the past. I can't undo the mistakes I made. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness. I never meant to hurt you. A silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of their shared history. The past hung over them, a dark cloud neither of them could escape. Forgiveness, Marcus muttered, shaking his head as he tried to make sense of everything. How do I forgive a lie this big? How do I forgive you for not telling me the truth from the start? Essence's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't look away. Because I was afraid, Marcus. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of what the truth would do to everything we've built. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He wanted to be angry, wanted to lash out, but something held him back. A flicker of understanding passed between them, a realization that they were both broken in ways they couldn't fix, both living with scars that defined them. They had been playing roles, pretending to be people they weren't, both hiding from the past. I don't know if I can forgive you, Marcus finally said, his voice raw. But I know that I don't want to lose this, whatever this is between us. I don't want to lose you, Essence. She exhaled, the breath she'd been holding finally escaping her lips. You won't lose me, she whispered, stepping closer to him. I've already lost everything once. I won't let that happen again. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, the weight of the truth settling into their bones. Marcus could see the raw vulnerability in her eyes, the same vulnerability he had buried beneath his anger and mistrust. They were both victims of the past, victims of the choices they had made, of the secrets they had kept. Then we rebuild, he said quietly. We rebuild from this. Essence nodded, her eyes glistening with a mixture of relief and pain. Together. In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning of understanding, the beginning of facing the truth and the choice to move forward. For the first time, they both acknowledged that the foundation of their marriage, the facade they had built, had crumbled. Now, they had to decide if they could rebuild piece by piece from the ruins. And in that quiet, fragile moment, Marcus realized that the hardest part wasn't facing the truth. It was learning to trust again and wondering if it was even possible. The days following the revelation were a blur of emotions, with Marcus and Essence both grappling with the weight of their new reality. The past, so full of lies and deception, had come crashing down around them. But in its wake, something unexpected had begun to take shape, a fragile hope. They had decided to move forward, not because they could forget the past, but because they had no choice. Their marriage, once a contract of convenience, had transformed into something more. What that something was, neither of them knew, but it was real, and it was theirs. Marcus sat across from Essence in their living room, a rare moment of quiet between them. The space, once cold and impersonal, now felt like a place they were beginning to shape together. He watched her, her eyes distant yet focused. She had always been strong, but now there was something softer in her gaze, vulnerability, but also determination. How are you feeling? Marcus asked, breaking the silence. Essence glanced at him, her lips curving into a small, weary smile. I'm learning how to breathe again. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the undercurrent of emotion she hadn't fully processed yet. The truth about Alaric's parentage, the past with Victor Harper, it was all still there, hovering over them like a shadow. Marcus leaned back, his thoughts drifting to the situation with his rival, Victor. Despite their personal struggles, the danger Victor posed hadn't disappeared. If anything, it was more real than ever. Victor had always been a threat, but now that the connection to Alaric was out in the open, Marcus's world was even more vulnerable. We need to talk about Harper, Marcus said quietly, his voice thick with the weight of what was to come. Essence flinched, her eyes dropping to her hands. I know, she said softly, but I don't want to live in fear anymore, Marcus. I can't keep looking over my shoulder. We can't keep hiding. He nodded, understanding her sentiment. We're not hiding anymore, but we can't pretend that the past won't catch up to us. The tension between them shifted, the balance between moving forward and facing the enemy looming just outside their door. Marcus had never been a man to shy away from a fight, and this battle would be no different. It wasn't just about protecting their marriage or their family anymore. It was about ensuring that they wouldn't be torn apart by forces outside their control. Later that night, after the quiet conversation, Marcus found himself standing in Alaric's room, watching the boy sleep. His heart softened as he watched the innocent rise and fall of Alaric's chest, the weight of their conversation still pressing on him. He couldn't protect him from everything. Not the past, not the mistakes of his father, not the secrets that had defined them all. But in that moment, Marcus made a vow. He would protect this family, no matter what. Essence joined him at the door, her presence a quiet reassurance. "He's growing up so fast," she said, her voice a whisper in the dim light. "Sometimes I forget how much has already been through." Marcus glanced at her, the shared weight of their experience pulling them closer. "We'll make sure he doesn't have to go through any more of it. Together." The next morning, the first real step in their new beginning came not with grand gestures, but in quiet resolve. They had decided that they would face what came, side by side. They would deal with the looming threat of Victor Harper, but they wouldn't let him control their future. Essence walked into the kitchen, her steps more purposeful now, a subtle shift in her posture. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like they had a chance. Their marriage, though born of lies, was now a foundation it could rebuild on. Marcus watched her, his mind still sharp with the weight of the decisions ahead, but a flicker of warmth rose in his chest. This wasn't a transaction anymore. It was real, and maybe, just maybe, they could create something lasting from the brokenness of their past. The silence between them now felt different. Not awkward, but comfortable. They were no longer just playing a part. They were writing their own story, one that wasn't defined by secrets, betrayal, or fear. "Let's make this work," Marcus said, his voice steady but full of conviction. Essence smiled, her gaze softening. "We already are." As the weight of the past began to lift, they faced a future with uncertain steps, but for the first time, they faced it together. And that, perhaps, was the most important step of all. The morning light filtered through the grand windows of the Pacific Palisades estate, casting a soft glow over the room. But inside, the air was thick with tension. Marcus stood by the window, staring out at the ocean, his mind racing. The confrontation he'd been dreading was finally here. Victor Harper was not just a shadow in his past anymore. He was a present danger, one that threatened everything Marcus had fought for. Essence stood beside him, her hands trembling in her lap. For the first time in weeks, they weren't united in their uncertainty. She knew what had to be done, but the choice, the weight of it, hung heavily in the air. "We can't let him win," Marcus said quietly, his voice laced with quiet fury. "He thinks he can control everything. My company, my life, my family. But this time, he's not getting away with it." Essence glanced at him, her eyes full of the same resolve. "I know, but what about us? What if fighting him means risking everything we built?" Marcus turned, his gaze sharp and focused. "What we built?" His voice softened, but the emotion was raw. "Essence, we've built something real. Our family. Alaric, you." Her heart clenched at the sincerity in his words. This wasn't the man she had met in that cold, sterile office. This wasn't the man who had treated their marriage like a business transaction. Marcus had changed. He had fought for their family, for their future. But now, the stakes had grown even higher. "Victor is not just after me, Marcus," Essence said, her voice trembling. "Is after everything, and that includes Alaric. If we don't stop him now—" "I know," Marcus cut her off, his jaw tightening. "We're not letting him destroy what we have. We'll do whatever it takes to protect our family." The showdown came sooner than either of them had expected. Victor Harper stood at the entrance of their estate, flanked by his lawyers, his smug expression as calculated as ever. The game had shifted, and now everything was on the line. "Marcus," Victor said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Essence, how quaint, the two of you, still pretending to be a family." Marcus stepped forward, his stance confident. "This ends the day, Victor." Victor raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking between Marcus and Essence. "You're still playing the hero, huh? You really think you can protect what's yours?" Essence stood by Marcus's side, her voice firm. "You don't control us anymore, Victor." You don't get to tear apart our lives, our family. Not this time. Victor's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. We'll see about that. The tension crackled between them, the weight of their past and present hanging heavy in the air. It wasn't just a business deal anymore. This was personal. As Victor left, his threat still lingering in the air, Marcus turned to Essence, his eyes searching Hales for a sign of the strength she had shown since the beginning. We did it, he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of everything that had led them to this point. Essence nodded, but there was no joy in her eyes. We did. But it was never just about winning. It's about what we protect. Our family. Marcus stepped closer, his hand reaching out to take Hayes. I wasn't sure if we could do this. If I could do this. But you've taught me how to trust again. How to fight for something real. Essence squeezed his hand, her eyes filling with unshed tears. We fought for it, Marcus. Together. And in that moment, surrounded by the remnant of everything they fought through, they knew they had built something that couldn't be taken away. The marriage that had started as a lie had transformed into a partnership forged in truth. Their family was stronger than ever. Marcus pulled her into an embrace, their shared commitment to the future binding them together. The past had been a storm, but now the horizon ahead felt clear. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and for the first time, they could look to the future with the trust and hope they had both been searching for. They had passed the final test. And now, they could move forward, not just as husband and wife, but as a family, united by love and the promise of a new beginning. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.